We'll go 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Long Lost Explorer. This is the 8th episode. Today, I have Simon Cockerell here. He is a North Korean tour guide from Koryo Group. Koryo Group is basically an Eastern tour guide company that travels around Russia, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Bhutan, and even North Korea as well. I just want to let everybody know that I'm on Apple, Spotify, pretty much everything that you could think of a podcast platform. So please subscribe, give me a good review and everything else. That would help me out a lot. So I want to introduce Simon. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Spencer. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so excited to do this. I've been wanting to talk to someone about North Korea for the longest time. And in America, it's probably just, I think it's just really hard because you don't really run into a lot of people who have been affiliated or even been to North Korea and stuff, because just with the relations that we have here. So it's really interesting to talk to someone who's been here. So from the beginning, what were you doing before, and how did you get into becoming a tour guide for basically these Eastern countries in North Korea?
Well, first of all, I'm not actually a tour guide. I'm the general manager of the
general
company.
Manager. Yeah, sorry.
The tour guides we use on the trips to North Korea, they're North Koreans. That's, as the law there mandates, they all work for domestic travel companies, of which there are several, but we have a partnership with one specific one, the largest one, and within that, specifically one section of that company exists just to work with my company, with Koryo Tours. I've been doing this job since April of 2002 now, so about 18 and a half years. So it's been quite a while. But the company itself predates me by several years. The company started in 1993, so we have been taking tourists primarily to North Korea for many years. Now, most of our business is taking tours and arranging cultural exchange and so on with North Korea. And the other countries you mentioned, we've been adding those to our roster for about 15 years now, since starting with Turkmenistan back in 2004, 2005. For me, I had moved to Beijing, where I am now, in 2000. And I met the guy who started the company, Nick Bonner. He's still the boss of the company. He's now overseas in Europe. People aren't really able to enter China at the moment, so he's stuck over there.
Yeah.
And I knew him through this amateur football league in Beijing, and that's really the story. It's not very exciting. That's how I got to know him. Now, he had just finished producing the first of the documentaries that we've worked on, which was about the North Korean soccer team who played in the World Cup in England in 1966. And I got to know him, and then he was arranging a trip to North Korea for some friends of his and invited me to go along. And thus I did, and here we are, getting on for 2 decades later. That's really the story.
Did you ever expect to do this? Like, did it ever come across your mind, just like North Korea, just in general, like would ever be a part of your life?
It did, because I was living in Beijing already, and it is the closest foreign country to where I am now, geographically at least. And so I had, seen North Korean restaurants, which, I'm from a small town in the UK, which, you don't see North Korean restaurants in the UK. So when I had moved to Beijing, you would see North Koreans around. They are identifiable. You'd see North Korean restaurants and think, well, this is weird, because it was always a place that existed almost as a kind of near fictional place that you would read about, but never really think that you would actually have some interaction with. And then in 2001, I was on holiday in Russia, and Kim Jong-il was traveling through Russia by train at that time on this famous train trip. And I happened to see him in the flesh in St. Petersburg just by chance. As I was walking out of a museum, he was walking into a cathedral, a church. And there were, Russian media around and police forming cordons and so on. But that was obviously a bit of a strange moment, because you don't expect to run into Kim Jong-il when you're on holiday, but I did. And so I guess over time, gradually, it became more manifest as a real life place to me. And then, yeah, and then this job opportunity sort of landed in my lap, as it were, and we've gone from there. And now I wouldn't say now it's completely normal, because it's very much not a normal place, but it
Yeah.
is somewhere that I have a better understanding of, and I have been there more than 180 times. So
Jeez.
I've got, on the ground experience. I mean, I haven't been there since December, because they have been closed to tourists since January, the first country to react to the virus situation.
Yeah, they closed
Um,
really quickly.
yeah, I mean, at the time it was sort of mocked. Actually, there were a lot of China sneezes and North Korea panics kind of comments, which seemed accurate, but now it seems like they were ahead of the game. So
Hmm.
who knows
Yeah.
what they knew, or maybe they just made a guess. But yeah, they shut up the border instantaneously, and it remains closed now.
Yeah. So, what going back to the restaurants, what would you describe the difference between a North Korean and a South Korean restaurant?
Well, I mean, for one thing, here in Beijing, there are a number of North Korean restaurants. When I first moved to China, there were fewer, but they were still prominent. And what people might consider a South Korean restaurant in China is generally a Chinese restaurant serving Korean food. There's by a fully South Korean staff. I don't
Hmm.
I don't know of one, to be honest. Maybe there are, but I don't know of them. There are Korean restaurants everywhere here. It's very popular kind of food, but
Hmm.
they're Korean restaurants run by Chinese people, whereas the North Korean restaurants are run by North Koreans, North Korean chefs, North Korean wait staff, North Korean booze, this kind of thing. They tend to cost a bit more, but there's a perceived legitimacy which is stronger than the other Korean restaurants, just because all the staff are Korean.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, if you go to South Korea, those restaurants are, South Korean restaurants, or as they call them, they're restaurants.
Yeah.
The main difference would be the culinary history, let's say, is more or less the same, but the supply of food, the range, diversity, and quality is much greater in South Korea than it is in North Korea, of course. So if you are a fan of South Korean food in South Korea, then when you go to North Korea, yeah, you'll find some things that are the same, but you won't find the range that you're accustomed to, for sure.
Ah, okay. I see. And so, when you first went there, obviously, I believe there's one flight a day that goes back and forth between uh, China and North Korea. Is that true?
Not exactly. I mean, at the time, there were two flights per week from Beijing, plus there was a cargo flight. And there were also flights from Shenyang in northeast China. There had been flights from Dalian also, and there are flights at the time to Vladivostok and to Khabarovsk in Russia. So now,
Mm.
these days, ignoring the virus situation, which has ended most flights,
Hmm.
there are twice a week flights to Vladivostok, twice a week flights to Shenyang,
Hmm.
twice a week scheduled flights to Shanghai, which don't always operate, and there are flights to Beijing 5 times per week. So it's increased, but that's still not very much for a whole country.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, compared to America or China, there's thousands and thousands a day. So, one question I did want to ask, or just kind of follow through on your first flight there. Were you nervous? Were you scared? Were you when you had this preconceived notion that like this is kind of a dangerous lockdown country and stuff? Like when you went there, did your mindset drastically change once you landed? Like walk me through like I guess
Yeah,
maybe the first tour.
I mean, it's a while ago, but I do remember it. It was
Yeah.
quite a formative experience. But I was in my mid 20s, so I wasn't scared of anything. Obviously, nobody is at that
Yeah.
age. So, and also, I'd lived in Asia for a while by that time. I'd been to places like Russia. I'd been through Russia for weeks twice, and so in my mind, North Korea was simply some kind of mixture of China and Russia. Now, this is a
Mm.
common perception. It's not inaccurate. It's partly true. There are some similarities there. You'll find, especially Chinese tourists, who make up the vast majority of tourists who go there, do tend to just consider North Korea to be China from the past,
Hmm.
which is a little bit unfair. But what they're seeing, they're looking for similarities, and they are there to be seen. But the differences are more are greater, let's say. So I was expecting it to be something similar to what I had experienced, and yeah, there I saw certain similarities, but I also saw a lot of differences. I went for about 4 days or so and did what we might call a kind of classic tour. Highlights of Pyongyang. We went to the mass games, went to the demilitarized zone, the de facto border with South Korea. Yeah, I remember it as being a lot of fun. I remember it being a mixture of the expected and the unexpected. I mean, I had read up on the place, of course, as almost all people who go there as tourists have. Nobody goes in cold. It's nobody's first holiday. Everyone, even if what they've read isn't true, they will have read something. So I've been to plenty of places since then where I didn't know who was in charge or what kind of system it was. But that's not really required for a lot of countries you visit. But for North Korea, it's inconceivable that someone might go there without some basic knowledge of the country, true or false, really.
Yeah, of course. So when you were there, what were, besides like sightseeing and stuff like that, what kind of activities were like a popular thing over there? Were there like sports? Were there type of games that they do? Like what was kind of more of a fun activity style? Did they have bars, clubs, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, these days they don't really have any clubs. There used to be a nightclub for tourists in the basement of one hotel, but that closed maybe a decade ago. But they do have restaurants and bars now. Until fairly recently, not many bars were available to tourists, but actually it's been one of our things to try and open up access to as many local bars as possible. The majority still not possible, but some are, and we do encourage that because it's good for interaction with some more kind of everyday people, let's say. But these are only open in the afternoon. There's not really a nightlife culture there at all. So restaurants, bars, parks, sports events, and also like big sports events, international games, football league, this kind of thing. Plus trying to interact on a sporting level with people who play volleyball in parks or this kind of thing. Yeah, going to fun fairs. In Pyongyang, at least, there are a couple of very modern fun fairs that are open at night. Now, that's a good place to go and interact with people on a kind of human level. And probably the biggest way to get this interaction and do something fun is the Pyongyang Marathon, which takes place every April, apart from this year. And that's something we worked for many, many years to get tourist access to, because it was only for locals and elite foreign athletes. And now for the last 6 or so years, it has been open to tourists. And that's now the single biggest participation event that foreign tourists can take part in.
I
So
see.
these, the place is institutionally set up to keep locals and visitors separate. And there's a deep and ongoing suspicion of anything foreign among the people there, which is taught to them from above. And so we consider it part of our mission to try and fight against that, to show that there are commonalities, even though there are great differences, there are commonalities, and that we are not dangerous and that they are not dangerous. And there's not really anything to be scared of on a human to human level. But it's quite difficult because the place is not set up to allow that, really.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you probably have had some interactions with the locals.
Oh yeah, as much as possible, really. That's quite a big thing. I mean, going there and having no interaction would be a big fail, actually.
Yeah.
So that's why we encourage people, go to fun fair in the evening, go to a local bar, go on a national holiday when people are more relaxed. You can go to somewhere like a park where a lot of locals gather for holidays. They have a few drinks, become a lot friendlier. Make a point of saying hello, because in North Korea people are not going to come over and greet you. It's not that kind of place.
They're not that curious.
They are curious, but they're conservative as well. But if you do the introductory work, then you can get something from it. But you're not going to make a lifelong friend, and you're not going to become social media buddies with somebody in North Korea, unfortunately. So it can be a bit frustrating because it's fleeting and ephemeral, I guess. But it's still worthwhile. And in the representation of foreigners in North Korean media and propaganda is relentlessly negative, 100% negative. And so I think that some responsibility falls on the foreigners who visit that country to show that actually we're not as evil as are made out. And really, that's not very difficult. So if you just don't do anything evil, then you've made a kind of small net gain
Okay.
against that state and government narrative. So for those who say, going to North Korea is sort of supporting the government, it very much isn't. The government says we're all up to no good. We say we're not all up to no good. Here's our evidence. We battle that narrative, whereas, um, it that's part of the mission, really. I mean,
Yeah.
a key part.
And do you feel like there has been a lot of improvement since you came in 2002?
No, probably not, because the
Oh, you're breaking up there.
oh, sorry, the is that
Oh yeah, you're
clearer?
you're good now. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. I mean, no, probably there hasn't been that much improvement on a macro level, because the majority of people in North Korea are not that mobile. They don't travel that much. I mean, more North Koreans go overseas than people expect, but that's because people expect zero, and actually it's thousands, which is still nothing in a country of 20 something million people. But I can say for sure that I know of dozens, if not hundreds of people who do have a more nuanced understanding of what it's like to interact with foreigners, the lives that foreigners lead, the opinions and that they hold, and that are aware of the huge variation in the outside world, which they wouldn't be without the tourism industry and without our work. So, the presentation of foreigners in North Korean news and propaganda is very one-dimensional,
Hmm.
and it leads people to believe there's their world and then there's the foreign world, or maybe the North Korean world, China, and then foreigners, which of course is not like that at all. There's great diversity, range of opinions, range of lived experience, and so on, and this is
Hmm.
something that they're thinking adults, they deserve to have the opportunity to know more about. So the average person in North Korea, no, they know very little about this, but hundreds and hundreds of people, possibly more, over the years have been exposed um, to some more reality about the foreign world than their own state provides them, which is a positive thing.
Yeah, I remember in our conversation, we're talking about propaganda on their side, but you were also talking about some of the news that we say the Western world, or just the world just produces about North Korea, and a lot of it is BS as well. Could you kind of give me a good example of I know you mentioned the
Mhm,
dog, them taking their dogs for food or something like that, which you
mhm.
said that was kind of ridiculous, but is there a lot of examples where they do this?
Yeah, so I would, first of all, I would distinguish between the North Korean side and the Western side, let's say, as much as there are such things. That the Western news is not propaganda because it's not directed from above. Much of it is largely to fill column inches, or the digital equivalent, and because North Korea is a nice, easy target, because there isn't really anyone who will say with any authority, yeah, this is true, this isn't true. And this is how we get stories repeated over the years and decades sometimes. Like, people, so many books and articles claim that North Koreans think Kim Jong Il hit 11 holes in one. Nobody has ever heard this. Nobody would believe that anyway. They think that, when the news reported all men had to have Kim Jong Un's hairstyle, this is falsifiable. You only need to show one person who doesn't have it. But yet this ran in so many pieces of news, and plus there are the more sinister stories. What makes them difficult to distinguish is that there's very few people able to say it's true or it's not true. Plus, some slightly mad stories from North Korea are true, so
Hmm.
it's hard. Just because it sounds crazy doesn't mean it's not true. The recent thing, as you mentioned, was the news that all pet dogs have been rounded up to be used as food. I mean, people in North Korea do eat dog, quite rarely because it's expensive. It's usually eaten in a certain season, and it's not people's pet dogs. It's more than one kind of dog. I mean, I had chicken yesterday, but I
Hmm.
also used to own a budgie,
Hmm.
and I don't see a huge contradiction between owning a pet bird and eating some chicken. And so most North Koreans are like that with dogs. Who has dogs anyway? A few farmers, some middle class people, because of course dogs, they have to be fed. They're not free. But no,
Hmm.
nobody's been handing in their dogs to the state for the kind of central food bank. That's something which most North Koreans would find to be laughable if they ever even heard that news, which most of them
Yeah.
never will, I'm afraid. But but it's believable because it involves eating dogs, which people know is a thing in Korea, and it involves a kind of dictatorial command for everyone to get in line and follow it. And these things also happen in North Korea. You know,
Yeah.
there have been times when everyone's been told to work for 200 days without a break, and they all knuckle down and do it. Doesn't mean they like it, but
Yeah.
they still get on with it. Doesn't mean they have a choice, but they still do it. So there are, you know, commands that come down. There are regulations on hairstyles. There are regulations on clothing styles,
Hmm.
things like that. And so it's easy to take those facts and to expand them into the realm of things which aren't true, but which look good reported in the news, because it's quite hard for most people to then just contact someone in North Korea and say, hey guys, is it true that you all have the same hairstyle? And for someone there to say, no, of course not. What about bald people?
Well,
You
this
know,
is kind of
for
my goal. I'm
example, you
just
know.
trying to bridge the truth by actually talking to people from different countries and
Right.
getting more exposure. So I'm the guy trying to mend the bridges essentially. So
Right. Well, that's good. That's noble. It's but
yeah.
difficult and
Oh, yeah,
frustrating, no doubt.
exactly. Oh, yeah. No, I see a lot of things, from Russia as well. You probably see a lot of Western articles about Russia, and you kind of roll your eyes, and a lot of it is not true because I've been there
Mm.
twice, and I thought everybody was telling me it was this communistic hellhole when I
Mhm.
was going over there. No, it's a very beautiful and safe place,
Oh
relatively
yeah, I
speaking. Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of what you hear about Russia, yeah, I mean, a lot of things are true. It is a very conservative place, and
yes,
for certain people, they might feel a bit less comfortable than others, depending on which part of the country you're in, I think. And there are a lot of social issues there,
hmm,
which also, of course, they exist in other countries too. But when people simply make comparisons between countries, it's not very helpful. This is like when people say, oh well, you know North Korea has a human rights issue. Well, what about the United States? Well, that's not very helpful. Just there may be issues in more than one place, but that doesn't stop it being an issue
yeah.
in one place. So yeah, I mean, I would recommend Russia is a good example. I think Russia is a fantastic, diverse,
I love the
complex,
place.
and
I love it
wonderful
so
place to
much.
visit. But I understand that for a lot of people, going there is a bit more nerve-wracking than it may be for me,
Yeah.
a tall, white, straight man.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah,
it's the
if
the
you're,
lived experience is different. Yeah.
yeah, I usually say if you're black, homosexual, it might not be the place for you. Like you have to take every country with the facts in hand and their
Hmm.
social issues and everything else.
Yeah, very much so.
There's probably places in Africa that if they see a white man, they would probably kill us. If they see again, I'm just saying like there are places, and we have to consider, what the risks are for each country that we
Oh,
go
sure,
to.
sure. Yeah, not every experience is the same for everyone. But I mean, that's why it's important when traveling anywhere, especially to, complex and sensitive places, to know about it in advance, really, and to not get bogged down in stereotypes, but to really sort of dig into realities, really. I think that's
Yeah.
important.
So speaking of just some kind of rules in North Korea, what were some that are pretty common that are unknown, and what were some that actually surprised you?
So first of all, for tourists, the most important thing that we do really is that we deliver a very thorough briefing before every tour, whether that be a group tour, individual tour. We deliver it face to face, because we send the information by email in advance. But you can't, it's not that we don't trust our clients, but you can't confirm that someone has read something. But
Yeah.
if you sit them down in front of you, you can make them listen to you. And this is all the do's and don'ts. And of course, it's all don'ts because there's not that many do's.
Yeah.
The key points, apart from a few practical things, the key points would be you have to ask before you take pictures there, ask your guides. So the guides are not from the government. They're not government minders. They're not agents or anything. They're just professional tour guides. And every group of tourists, whether it be a group of one or a group of however many, always have two guides. Now they facilitate, they do the logistics, all this stuff. They're not, to be scared of. I mean, a lot of people like to imagine that they're from the Stasi or something, but they're really just tour guides. But they're responsible for their tourists. So you have to ask them before you take pictures. Most of the time it's fine. For some sensitive areas, not so fine. Then don't wander off anywhere. So that's basically they'll say it's for your safety and convenience, but why is there a safety issue in a country that claims to have no crime? Anyway, it's contradictory, but it is the rules and it's not made by them. So you have to stay in with your group. And then the third thing is that it's deeply inappropriate within North Korea to openly criticize their leadership. So it doesn't mean you don't have to suck up, you don't have to pretend to be a North Korean or anything like that. You don't have to, leave your political ideas and preferences and so on at home. But if you've decided that you're going to go there to openly criticize their highest leadership, which is three people after all, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, then you're very much in the wrong place. So you won't get kicked out, you won't get locked up, no angry mobs will form. But the closest parallel I would say is a little bit like, going to a church and just deciding that you're going to mock the higher figures there. You don't have to believe it, just have some sensitivity to the beliefs and sensitivities of your hosts. I mean, those are the main things we say to tourists, but tourists are not North Koreans. So in North Korea, grown man isn't going to wear shorts unless they're doing sport. But tourists can wear shorts. Tourists can wear jeans. Tourists can have tattoos, piercings. North Korean men, they don't grow their hair longer than 5 centimeters, but foreign men are welcome to do that. So there's not, the regulations that govern North Korean life, they don't govern the lives of foreign visitors there. People just need to have some sensitivity for where they are, basically. And of course, if you want to ask the guides, hey, why can't I wander off on my own? A lot of them will say, well, because you don't speak the language. But loads of foreigners can speak Korean. And also, why would not speaking the language be a barrier to wandering off alone? I mean, I wouldn't have been able to wander off in 90% of the countries I've ever been to if there was some kind of language class for that. I mean, not being able, there are some people who literally can't speak, but yet they're allowed to wander around. So some of the answers given are a little bit silly, but they don't tend to be lies. People are worried about being lied to, but I've found the guides don't lie about stuff. Some of the information they give you isn't true, but they at least believe it to be true. But that's, North Korea is a very ambiguous place, especially when you're there. I mean, you have to be willing to go there with 100 questions and come back with 1,000 questions. That's the beauty of it. Don't expect to get any answers when you're there, or answers that don't lead to more questions.
Gotcha. Now I'm assuming is for your time doing all this, you've probably have had a few tourists come and cause some issues. I'm assuming. Have you had many? Can you think of anything particular where you've had just like a really bad traveler there and that got in a lot of trouble?
Not so much. I mean, because the preparation is quite intense, and we do send out all this information, do the briefing. Most people are sensible enough to take this on board, and so most issues caused on the spot are micro issues. Actually, occasionally, we might lose someone in a park, or someone might, take a picture without thinking that is problematic. But these are small things. I mean, the guides and our staff are very experienced in dealing with this. It's not that huge an issue. Most dramas, let's say, that involve our tourists have been medical, which again have been very few. I've had to take people to hospital quite quickly, had people stitched up, put on a IV overnight. But again, touch wood, nothing too major. There have been cases, of course, of tourists there getting in legal trouble, being detained, being locked up. Of course, the most famous case is the Otto Warmbier case. Now, he didn't travel with us, but in some degree, depending on what the cause of the issue is, it may not matter who you travel with. We've only had one person traveling with us out of the tens of thousands of people we've taken in 27 years who was detained in the country. He was released a few months later, and what he was detained for was distributing religious material, which is a crime in North Korea. Now, that is so noted in the information we send out, and that is explained in detail in the briefing which he attended. So this was not by accident, and you can't get religious material in North Korea. You have to prepare it in advance. And so I don't wish to be unsympathetic, but was
it's
something
their country, and you have to play by their rules.
Yeah, this act was premeditated in the full knowledge that it was illegal, and in the full knowledge that the consequence was likely to be a detention. And despite knowing all that, it was done anyway. So, we do our very best to explain to people what you can and can't do. But if you are determined to do something illegal, then there's not that much that can be done about it. I mean, the fact of the matter is personal safety should be people's major first thought when going anywhere, especially to North Korea. All the cases of people getting in trouble are known about. If you don't do those things, then you'll be fine. I don't know of anyone arbitrarily detained or randomly held back, nobody who's been framed or anything like that. Always something has been done, most of the time premeditated, occasionally, I believe, accidentally. But the number of cases are very small. They're all in the public domain. If people are interested, they really can just look it up and find all the cases of people getting in trouble there. There aren't any other secret ones.
Yeah. And, that's kind of what I say, just, to everybody, that you have to play by the rules, just, kind of keep your head down and all that stuff. Even though you disagree with it, just shut your mouth. There's nothing you can do. You're one person against a whole entire government. So that's...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, agree or disagree. No, very few people sincerely agree with all the rules and laws of anywhere that they are, country or abroad. But, it doesn't mean that I disagree with this, therefore I'm mandated and obligated to break this law. That's, you wouldn't last very long anywhere with that.
So Adam Warmbier was obviously returned to the United States, and he did die. And it looks like, from everything that I've just seen and stuff, it looks like Trump and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, is... it seems like they're kind of close. What's your opinion on their relationship and how everything is going?
I mean, I'm not a political commentator, and I don't have any inside line on this. And frankly, nobody has an inside line on Kim Jong-un. So it's hard to say. But yeah, it in many ways, it's very positive that they have met formally as leaders, which is something that really hasn't happened before. I mean, various American presidents have been to North Korea, but they've been after the fact, after their term. Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton would be the two. However, there's been no agreement made. It's great. The first summit in Singapore, when they announced, well, we've made these agreements to end nuclear testing and so on. This is great, very good progress. But there was no meat to the sandwich. And then the follow-up summit in Vietnam was an embarrassment for mostly for the United States, because they clearly went in thinking, on the spot, we won't bother preparing enough. We'll just rely on, the personal relationship between the leaders. But the personal relationship is based on, well, what appears to now be up to 25 letters. That's not really enough to get to the heart of a multi-decades long issue. So I don't want to take a controversial political stance, but if you base your international diplomacy on being able to negotiate a deal, and then you can't negotiate a deal, that's a fail. So it's a real disappointment for everyone. But the North Koreans have clearly shown over the decades that they will wait out every US administration. North Korea's had 3 leaders since 1945, and they will be patient. So I think it would be great for the world and great for Donald Trump if he could, make a deal. But the clock is ticking, so or unless he gets reelected anyway. So the clock may be ticking for a while longer, who knows. But I don't know. I mean, having international diplomacy based around 2 people getting along is good in the short term, but you need something more substantive than that. If you're going to change president at some point, hopefully, it can't just be based on 2 people liking each other or being able to talk to each other. You need to have some structure in place.
I've seen the argument for the North Korean side that comparing it to kind of what happened in Vietnam, where they try to go and gain kind of rush in and get influence. It feels like the North Koreans are skeptical about trying to make any deal or any diplomacy with them, because they feel like they will be in some aspect influenced or taken over. And I read I read some history on Kim Jong-il, and basically his perception was that, American imperialism, essentially. They come in, they try to get basically their hands on whatever they want to get their hands on, and to kind of gain more control and access to the world. Is that what you would probably perceive their argument to be on their side?
That's certainly their argument publicly. I mean, whether or not the people at the top are really buy into this view, I don't know. Also, I can't really say for sure whether that's an accurate thing to think or not. I mean, I remember during the invasion of Iraq, certainly this was what the North Korean media was saying, was like, here's another example of Americans grabbing oil, blah blah blah. The same thing that let's say left-wing press worldwide was saying. Really, it's not difficult to make that case. It's not difficult to have people believe it, especially in a country where you control the entire narrative, and in a place where people for decades have been brought up and educated and just had it hammered into their heads, relentless anti-Americanism. So it's not hard to make the case in North Korea that the United States is a danger to them, because everyone's grandparents lived through the Korean War, which there's a big difference in the point of view as to who started it between North Korea and the outside world. But regardless of that, American and Allied bombers laid waste to every city in North Korea, causing immense suffering. This is, an objective fact. And anyone who was on the receiving end of that suffering probably doesn't care that much about who started it or not. If your house gets bombed, you don't think, well, we started it, so fair enough. You think, you're distraught regardless. So there is a kind of, a recent memory of this happening. And that's been mentioned daily in the news, in the education system, and so on. So people really, it has created an institutionally anti-American country. So I think for the average North Korean to be trusting of a deal with America would be quite a big ask. But that said, what the average North Korean thinks doesn't actually affect the policy in the country. They're not accountable to the popular masses, let's say. So a deal can be made whether the people trust in it or not. And also people there, they have been taught to just, trust in what the government does. So there is opportunity if the higher powers in North Korea are able to find some ground on which they can make a deal with the US to stop the sanctions, which is North Korea's main thing, is they want an end to sanctions. And its main point of view is that they don't want nuclear weapons. Simple as that. But the thing is that you can give up the nukes and the sanctions come down, but the sanctions can come back up the next day. The lesson of the Iran nuclear deal is very clear, that why, and I don't, as I said, don't want to dig into the politics too much, but if you were North Korea, you would look at that Iran deal, especially the recent comments by Mike Pompeo, still trying to hold Iran, the United States has dropped out of, as gross hypocrisy and clearly the action of an unreliable negotiator. Why on earth would you give up something that your country has contributed to the impoverishment of large parts of the country, give it up in exchange for something just to have the other side give up on it very soon after? It's hard to see why somebody would do that. The Iran deal is both a huge mistake and an example to anyone in North Korea of really why they need to have a more solid deal.
There's probably going to be people spamming comments with a lot of rebuttals, but I understand.
Honestly, there's not really anything to rebut, though. I mean, the Iran deal existed, and then it didn't exist, and that will be the example that North Koreans look at. And I don't judge it for myself, but those are the facts.
I definitely see that. What I'm also interested in is North and South Korea. It seems like the tensions have kind of slowed down a little bit. What have you noticed about that? What's your opinion on it? Because I've been seeing things, Japan, South Korea and stuff, they've been kind of, it seems like things have been cooling down over there recently.
Yeah, I mean, South Korea. Often the situation between North and South Korea depends on what government is in power in South Korea, because it's always the same government in North Korea.
Yeah.
But in South Korea, it does change, and it changes, swings. People like to say left and right. Of course, this is overly simplistic, but let's go with it anyway. They currently have a government of the left, a government that looks to North Korea and sees opportunity for engagement and opening. But who knows? In a short time, they might have a government of the right which sees pressure and leveraging the military and economic power of South Korea, which is far greater than that of North Korea,
Hmm.
to enforce their will, let's say. So but this is democracy. This is what happens, and North Korea has to take these opportunities. They've had a unique opportunity recently where they've had a friendlier government in the south, plus they've had direct speaking opportunities with the United States at the same time, and still nothing has come of it. So I think it's going to seem like this was a golden moment for them, which was squandered or missed due to whatever factors, themselves or others. But yeah, certainly in South, the current government has expressed a lot of willingness to deal with North Korea. Now, some of those projects that they wish to reopen, cross-border tourism, trade, and so on, some of these are blocked by North Korea, some of them are blocked by the United States, some of them are blocked by just the fact that institutions in democratic societies are not built to just act on the whim of the current government. So you can't just have the president say, I want something to happen, and then it happens. It's not that kind of place. Also, they're hamstrung a little bit by the strict term limits in South Korea, whereas the president only gets one term, so you can't be president for very long. So it's tricky there. But yeah, the situation is not as bad as it has been in the past.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say. I mean, the North Korean perspective, whether this is what they really feel or whether this is just what is expressed, is that the United States has a lot of influence over South Korea. I mean, the North Korean media simply says that South Korea is a puppet state of the US, and so really they want to deal with the United States, not with South Korea.
Yeah. No, I have heard that. What do you think the future? Do you think there is going to be a more liberalized North Korea? Do you think in the future it will start becoming more free?
I would hope so. I mean, in our field, in our field in tourism, which is the only thing I'm really professionally qualified to talk about, things like allowing people to roam around the country a bit more freely, use public transport, these things, that would be great. But of course, that pales in comparison to having that be allowed for local people. That would be the most important thing. So obviously, yeah, I'm self-interested that I want our clients to be able to benefit from liberalization, but that will only come about as a result of a general liberalization.
Yeah.
And I just don't see it happening at the moment, but I would gladly be completely wrong about that. I mean, like a lot of things, it may happen quickly and it may happen without anyone really seeing the signs of it happening.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, but they've had very much the same system in place for decades. So a lot of people think, well, yeah, this must happen, but they're basing this on it must happen because it happened in the Soviet Union, or this must happen because something happened in China. But that doesn't tend to be why things happen. There's no kind of forced destiny. Like someone needs to take some action, and that action hasn't been taken. So I think it's a pity, and nobody is in favor of less freedom. Like nobody is opposed to freedom, but it's a given among the people of North Korea that the restrictions in their lives are somehow imposed from outside, or the necessity of their restrictions are imposed from outside, which is a great pity. I mean, most people, I would say, genuinely believe that to a large extent. And it's a shame that they find a way to justify these things. Yeah, it's a great pity.
I mean, they don't have internet. Is that correct? Is there internet there?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, I use the internet there, but I'm not North Korean. I mean, it is possible to use the internet there, but for the average person there, there's no internet.
I see. And but where is that usually? Is there like strict areas where you can go? Like I'm assuming you can't show Facebook to a local there or something like that.
Oh, you could, but they wouldn't know what it is. So, I mean, I have a North Korean SIM card, which any foreigner, any foreign visitor can buy. It's quite expensive, and that gets you online. And so I use the internet when I'm there all the time. Most Instagram pictures I post, I only post from North Korea until recently when I haven't been there for several months.
Yeah.
But yeah, the average person there, they'll be aware of the concept of the internet. It's mentioned in their news. They have a kind of internal version, the intranet, which again very few people use, and people will have seen films and TV and popular culture where it's mentioned. So a lot of people there have some concept of what it is, but actually the concept, or their conception rather, versus reality, quite different, I would say.
Yeah. Do a lot of them speak English? Is English taught over there?
It's in the curriculum, but then that doesn't mean that people speak it just because you study it in school and pass a few tests. No, the average person nationwide doesn't really speak any English beyond, hello, bye bye, okay, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But you'll find that a lot of people who've been students, university students, will speak English not too bad at all. I mean, what's missing often are the kind of cultural references. You can't expect people to be up to speed on, the latest internet slang, but
Yeah.
certainly, there are, quite a number of people who can speak English, and not just English, of course. I mean, Chinese is the major foreign language of at least the border regions. The
Hmm.
vast majority of people from abroad who most North Koreans will ever interact with are not English speakers, they're Chinese speakers. So Chinese is probably the most commonly spoken foreign language, even if it's not a truly global language like English.
Do people go from, let's just say, for example, China or Russia to go study in North Korea? Is that a thing?
Yeah, but not so much. From Russia, not really, no. I mean, there are a couple of people who recently have been there from Russia to study, but they tend to be embassy kids. No, the Russian embassy there is
Mm.
very large, has a few hundred people. They have a school there, and there have been Russians at university there, and there have been people from the West as well at university there, but very few, single figures.
Yeah,
From
those are
China,
things
yeah,
you
there
don't
are
hear.
there are more. Yeah, I mean it is known. Let's say, I mean, some people run occasionally. There used to be this Russian student who ran his blog from Pyongyang. He's not there studying anymore, but it's very few. There are some foreigners teaching at a university there as well. There's a privately funded university called the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. It was set up by some Americans, but Korean Americans, and all the faculty. Originally, the plan was all the faculty to be foreigners, and most of them
Mm.
were Americans. And then in 2017, the US government banned Americans from going to North Korea. So
Yeah.
now their foreign faculty have to be non-Americans, which is more difficult because they don't pay for one thing. So that obviously it's voluntary, and also the qualifications are quite difficult to get.
Yeah.
But that university teaches only in English. That's an interesting place and a good opportunity for a handful of foreigners to get, to see what it's like teaching there.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but yeah, there are some Chinese students at university there. Not so many. I mean, after all, lots of Chinese students like to travel abroad, but I think most people would probably prefer Oxford to
Yeah.
Kim University.
Yeah.
Perhaps, if you're given the choice.
Yeah, of course. And so, speaking of when the Americans were basically not allowed in North Korea
Mhm.
in 2017, Mike Pompeo did it after I believe it was after the Wambier. I think that was just kind of
Yes, yeah,
one of
yeah.
the
It
response
was a
from it.
direct response to that. Yeah, absolutely.
And and you were saying that about 20% of your tourists were actually Americans.
Yeah, yeah. Before that point, I mean, there were times during my experience that there were some years where the North Koreans simply wouldn't let Americans in, and then around I think 2009 or 10, it basically normalized. They said, okay, Americans are the same as all other so-called Europeans, which is what a term they use for everyone who's not Chinese, basically.
Hmm.
Um, and then there was some residual limitations, like Americans were not allowed to travel on the international train, for no reason, basically, for some reason which is no reason. And then a handful of regional hotels didn't allow Americans to stay in them. But by and large, we could then integrate the groups, because before we could only have specific American groups. So this was all normalized, which was great. And the United States, for our market, and our market is the non-Chinese market, the so-called European market. The US is the most highly populated country within that market of the West, let's say. And so, yeah, having 20 to 25% of the tourists be Americans is perhaps unexpected for many. But in the end, that meant that we would take 600 or 700. The whole market would take 600 or 700 Americans in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then overnight that became not an option. There was a bit of a warning. We managed to get a few Americans in, last minute. But since that time, the only Americans who've been as tourists are people who've traveled on non-US passports.
Gotcha. Who is besides I don't know if you get much Chinese, but like besides, who's your biggest country that goes and travels to North Korea?
Oh, we don't really take many Chinese. It's not our market. The Chinese market is something a bit different. It's a lot more cookie cutter, a lot more mass tourism. Let's say
It's probably a lot easier.
Yeah, there can be a lot. There can be 1,000 or 2,000 Chinese tourists per day in a high season, which is that's not the kind of market we work in. And also Chinese tourists don't visit that many places. It's a kind of different game, really. Our current biggest, number one country, let's say, is probably the UK. So UK, Germany, northern rather than southern Europe, but people from all over. A lot of people living in Asia already, in
Gotcha.
Beijing, Seoul, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Singapore, and so on. Yeah, but really a big mixture. I mean, we never really get a group which is all from one country. It's always a mixture.
Yeah. So I know you said, you had basically an hour, so we're about at 10 minutes. I want to just go through really quick. So describe the process. Let's just say, I know I'm American or whatever. Let's say I'm a British person. What is your process of going from England to North Korea? How does that all work?
So basically, you would go to our website, koryogroup.com, and if you wanted to join a group tour, which there are group tours from 2 nights to 20-something nights, so there's a huge range of tours, you'd look on there to find one that suits you. And if you wanted a private tour, you would contact us and we'd work out a bespoke itinerary for you. After you're satisfied that the tour that you've chosen is the one you want to do, you would fill out an online form, which takes about 2 minutes. You'd send us a copy of your passport and a photograph, and then that's basically it. We would arrange the visa for you. We don't need you in person until the actual briefing. The visa is a separate document that we would have issued in Beijing. Some people want to have the visa in their passports, which doesn't cause them any trouble really, but they would then need to go to a North Korean embassy in London, in Berlin, in Brasilia, in many countries. They'd have to go there to pick that up, not to apply, but just to pick it up.
They want it in their passport. They want to save it, have a little token of it. Yeah.
And it looks good. I mean, for me, I'd prefer to have it outside the passport because I just fill my passport every couple of years. So,
so
it's better for me not to. But then they'd come to the starting point of the tour, which is usually Beijing. Sometimes we have tours from Shanghai, from Shenyang, from Dandong, all in China, or even Vladivostok. They'd come to meet us to start the tour. They'd suffer through the do's and don'ts briefing, ask all their questions, and then either get on a plane or get on a train for group tours accompanied by one of our staff to North Korea. The process is very, very simple. I mean, the hardest part of going to North Korea is getting the Chinese visa. If you need a Chinese visa to pass through China to start the trip, that's always more difficult than the North Korea trip. Visas are not refused arbitrarily. It's really very simple actually, and it's like going on a school trip. So everything's taken care of. You're fed and watered. You're taken from place to place. There is variation in the itinerary. There's not just one tour, but once the tour itinerary has been sent to Pyongyang, that is the tour that you're supposed to do. But there's a little bit of room for maneuvering on the ground, but not all that much. So best to plan ahead, really.
Yeah, and I'm assuming all the different countries as well, Russia, Kyrgyzstan, and stuff like that, they're relatively the same.
No, they're much more open. I
Oh,
mean, much
yeah.
easier, really. I mean, those places. Some of the visas, Turkmenistan, for example, the visa is a bit complicated, but we take care of it anyway. Russia is just a case of we get a letter of invitation. Um, but also those trips, people can stay on longer and they can wander around by themselves. Imagine this freedom that
Yeah.
that you can have there. So there are a lot more open societies. I mean, on paper, Turkmenistan and North Korea are very similar for tourists, but in reality, very, very different indeed. Very,
Yeah.
huge difference. Um, but yeah, I mean, somewhere like Kazakhstan is actually a very easy place to travel. But the tours that we offer there go to the areas which are logistically more complex. They're weapons testing areas, former
Mm.
gulags, remote cities, that kind of thing. So what people are joining up for is the kind of experience that we offer, a combination of serious elements and also a bit of fun, that kind of thing, a mixture, combination of tourism and free time. This finely balanced product, really.
Yeah.
Whereas North Korea, you have to arrange everything, basically. There's not really free time, do what you want this afternoon, see you tomorrow morning. That's not really a
It's
thing
very
in North Korea.
structured.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. There's
Yeah.
not, I mean, if you're at the fun fair, you can wander off for a bit. If you
Yeah.
run the Pyongyang Marathon, no tour guides are going to run a Pyongyang Marathon or the 10K or a half like that. But you can explore the city by yourself, but you're still in a race. You still have to stay on the roads that
The
are
route. Yeah.
assigned for that. Yeah, so you can't just wander off. But yeah, that's part of the deal, really. I mean, if you really genuinely can't go to North Korea and not obey the rules, then you really shouldn't go there. There's a lot of other countries that you can go to, so it's not
Definitely.
for
I agree.
everyone. But if you have a fascination with it, then obviously there's nowhere like it, and that's the place to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that you said there's something coming up that they might be able to re-sign the visa, or what were you saying? There's an
So
expiration.
the State Department policy.
Oh, you cut out. Hold on.
Sorry.
Oh, you cut out. Say that again.
Okay, so the ban on Americans traveling to Cuba was from the Treasury Department. So it was essentially a ban on using US dollars in Cuba. But this ban on traveling to North Korea is State Department ban, which is a ban on using a US passport to go to North Korea, that's much stricter. That ban came into force September 1st, 2017, and it was a 1-year ban. And every year it is either up for renewal or lapsing. And we are speaking now on August 28th, for me at least. And
Mhm.
so in a few days, that ban will either lapse or it will be renewed. And it will probably be renewed. After all, at the end of the day, this is low risk for the United States because not that many Americans go to North Korea anyway. It can be presented as a way of saying, look, if you don't go there, you can't get in trouble, which is undoubtedly true. But if
Yeah.
you don't go swimming, you can't drown. And if you don't
Yeah.
have guns, nobody gets shot. So, open societies do not ban crossing the road because, you can't get hit by a car if you never cross the road. That's not really how it works. But this is an easy policy to bring in, and there's not huge public outcry against it. And no one in America is voting based on North Korea policy or anything like that. So I would imagine that this may well stay in place for quite a while. But on the flip side, if negotiations proceed between the US and North Korea, this would be an easy policy to drop.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
that's the hope. But I would expect in a couple of days, re-signed and renewed for another year.
Yeah, well, I imagine too with COVID that probably doesn't help as well. I mean, that's just an added
Yeah.
thing that we have to deal with as well. But so I'm at least probably expecting another year. Who knows? It probably could go on for another few years. But I would love to go. My family and everybody says I'm crazy, but this is my life. I love travel and I want to do as much of it as I can. Obviously,
Yep.
when you get a family and stuff, a lot of that slows down, but
Mhm.
traveling is part of my life and I do love it. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, it's so fascinating just listening to, actually getting some good insight and trying to get over the things that we hear in the West and just even around the world as well.
Mhm.
I wish there was more of a bridge so we could have more of an understanding to create more pragmatic approaches to it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe one day.
yeah, no, yeah,
Always hoping.
We'll definitely see. But I appreciate you for coming on. And I know you only had about an hour, so you have to get off here in a few minutes. And I just want to let everybody know again, that's koryogroup.com, KORYO group.com. You can look them up on social media, the KORYO Tours as well. Is there anything else you want to add to that, or?
No, not really. Just, if anyone's interested.
Hold on, you cut out. So you're going to need to say that again.
Right. Really, just if anyone's interested in North Korea or trips to the unusual places that we run tours to, drop us a line. We have a newsletter, we have social media. We'd be glad to be in touch with you, and keep the conversation going, really. But thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate your time, your questions, and I hope that your viewers and listeners find it to be interesting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I'll definitely send you the video when I'm done. But thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure.
Right.
Take care. Thanks again.
Nice to meet you, Simon. Thank you.
Likewise, mate. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.